you want your dog to be like a good boss. You want someone to come in and take charge of the situation because if there's any gray areas, all those sheep, which are like employees, they're going to take advantage. But the dog comes in with the right attitude and all of those attributes, which we're all looking for, and then you're on to a winner.
Welcome to the Absolute Dogs Sexier and the Squirrel podcast. I'm Lauren Langman. I'm one of the world's leading dog trainers, and it's my mission to help owners become their dog's top priority. In each episode, you'll discover how to gain trust and communicate with your dog like never before, creating unbreakable bonds that make you the most exciting part of their world. Hello and welcome to the Sexier and the Squirrel podcast, the podcast that gives you real life dog training results and sometimes human results too. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Emma Gray. Emma, I'm so happy to have you here. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what you do?
Hey, I'm really happy to be here. Yes, I am Emma Gray and I am a sheepdog trainer and sheep farmer from the Isle of Bute. And we are all about all things working sheepdog and farming.
I literally love that you spend your whole life playing with dogs, playing with sheep. You've even got some chickens and ducks and other
I
bits,
know.
right? Like that is your life. And was that always your dream?
Yeah, I'm living the dream. I remember being younger and just thinking I wanted a farm. I was the kind of girl that blew out the candles on my cake and I was like, right, I want a farm. I want to do farming full time. And it was never really an option for me because mum and dad were on a rented farm and mum and dad were very much like, look, this isn't in our gift. You have to go out there and you have to find a career yourself because this isn't going to be here for you all the time. And I tried a few other things and it was always just calling to me, the farm and the dogs. And I think early on, I was one of those girls who just wanted to be interested in animals. I wanted to be involved with them. I think, God forbid, if dad had let me had a pony, I would be really into that, but he didn't. And when I finally got my hands on a border collie when I was 13, that was just the all I needed. And it was a slippery slope from there on in.
So you're now in the Isle of Bute or on the Isle of Bute. Tell us a little bit more about that because that's been a bit of an adventure, I think.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Scottish Borders. I was there until I was 17, and then when I was 17, I moved to Northumberland, and we were there for 17 years. So I was lucky enough to be a shepherd, employed until I was 23, and then I was lucky enough to be granted the tenancy of a little small holding. It was about 100 acres in the middle of nowhere. No mains water, no gas, no mains electric. It was pretty rough. But it gave me the opportunity to start at the bottom of the ladder in terms of farming and also enabled me to start kind of embracing my passion for the dogs. Because no one minds if you have, 4 or 5 dogs out in the middle of nowhere. And I was there and grew up the farm there and started to train the sheepdogs. We work in sheepdogs, started to compete with them. And then I was there for 10 years. I met my partner there, and together we looked for another farm tenancy. And it just so happened that the tenancy on this farm where we are now, which is 700 acres on the Isle of Bute, came up. So we moved in, I think it'd be about 2021, just sort of those COVID years. And we're really, really happy here. It's an absolutely amazing farm, amazing community, and just a fantastic island. If people haven't been, it's well worth a visit. It's beautiful.
Well, Liza's definitely, as you know, got it on our list. It is happening. She's absolutely got it on. We just have to work out the date. So I definitely want to go back to that at some point because there's lots more to dig in. I think we could do a long podcast here, but I'm going to ask you, I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to go to dogs. And I'd love to know, what are some of your favorite qualities in a dog? What are some of the things you look for? And it's funny because I think you could pick a dog for me and I could pick a dog for you, knowing the style of dogs that you like. And I think you already know the style of dogs I like. And I think that's really interesting just to explain to our listeners, because I think our listeners will be so interested. So what do you look for in a dog?
I think like you and me will probably look for the same fundamental things in a dog. I mean, beyond the talent that they need for the two different disciplines, I feel that fundamentally you need a dog with brains. And the biggest thing I like to see in a dog is heart. The ability to dig deep and keep going when the going's got tough. because no matter how talented your dog is, if they haven't got that sort of will to use it in the right way to try and help themselves and help you, you haven't really got much. And I think having the right attitude is really important. So that I think when it comes to learning, if a dog's got a lot of talent, that's great. But if they haven't got the right attitude and the way to apply it, I think it kind of falls down there. So obviously, and then beyond that, you go into like, obviously, I'm looking for an athletic dog, a dog that's got lots of stamina. And then you need talent. And talent for me is the ability to read sheep, the ability to make the right shape around the sheep, and what we call power, which will probably be different to your kind of power, I guess. We're looking for power, the ability to walk into sheep and move them without frightening the sheep. And that sounds really weird, but you really want a dog to be able to come in and say, right, guys, I'm the boss, and just move the sheep. It's kind of like you want your dog to be like a good boss. You want someone to come in and take charge of the situation, because if there's any gray areas, all those sheep, which are like employees, they're going to take advantage. But the dog comes in with the right attitude and all of those attributes, which we're all looking for, and then you're on to a winner.
Love it. No, so many good attributes. And you're completely right. Power for you is different to power for me. Power for me might be, if you said power and I didn't know what you were talking about, the context you've just given, I think what you would see on like an outrun where a dog would really like power off. But what you mean is, yeah, you're right. Actually, you can, I saw it the other day because, as you know, you started me off with the idea of, I'd like to do this. And so I saw it the other day with one of the dogs I was training and playing with. She literally walked up to a ewe, and the ewe really stomped and like kept stomping. And I was like, oh, I wonder how this goes. And like, you don't, if you've not seen that before, you don't really know what's like how the outcome of that goes. And I suppose in that situation, I suppose especially if that you had a lamb at foot, then they might not take to that so easily, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the ability to move into that situation and take control of it and back you up. Because sometimes if the dog hasn't got the right nature, they might get excited or panicky about that. And that therefore feeds the sheep. Either it makes the sheep more panicky or more likely to fight. Sheep only have fight or flight. So if they're fighting, it you don't really want the dog to go toe to toe with that. You want the dog to go there and go, listen, I'm here. And for the sheep to accept the kind of authority and turn around and move away. So it takes a lot of mental fortitude on the dog's part to move itself into quite a threatening situation and to try and overcome that. And it's not every dog will have that. And not even the dogs who do have it don't have it every single time. But you hope if you're selecting for that in your breeding and choosing that to compete with, that it'll really, really help you out.
Yeah, no, it's mega. And just listening to you, the other thing I've noticed, and again, I'm a complete amateur here, but I've noticed the difference between dog to dog, and the sheep just change. So sometimes the sheep are like, got this, walk straight, walk, nice march, off we go. And other times they're like flighty and they're flying, and yet they're the same sheep. So I've got the same 10 sheep, and yet with one dog, they can look like completely different species to another dog. And actually, I can see that you probably want them looking like, I don't know, you tell me, but the cool, calm, collected, walking with attitude, but not like freaked out. Whereas with the other dog, maybe like they're scattered and the energy's wrong. And you can just see that that dog's hotter and they're hotter with it.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. The energy the dog conveys. Some dogs are really powerful, but equally can kind of calm their sheep, and the sheep feel comfortable because they feel respected. Whereas they can be the sort of more jumpy, anxious dog will make the sheep jumpy and anxious, and they don't feel as well contained, so they might play up. And also they don't trust the dog fully, so they might be less pliable. I mean, we're all just looking for that sort of perfect dog that's got everything, but they're not so easy to find.
So true, so true. And you just again, it made me think of something else. You said respect for the sheep and vice versa. You taught me something really interesting when you were here, and this is something I've not heard from anyone else, but I really took it on board from you, and it really resonated with me. And you said about you really need to look after the sheep, like your job is to look after the sheep, and that I really like enjoyed hearing, because I see so many sheep where I live that don't look, number one, healthy, and number two, happy. And this is all around. I mean, I live in sheep territory, so anyone who's been to Absolute Dogs headquarters, it is literally sheep everywhere, and not my sheep, sheep. And so for me, when I see, and what you mean obviously is take care of them with a dog, but also generally, I thought that was really interesting because I haven't seen that from some trainers, that the sheep really are a big part of your team.
I suppose coming from where I'm coming from, like the sheep are always the most critical component of the farm. You know, Dad was like, "Look, your dogs are there to gather the sheep, not, you know, the sheep aren't there for the dog." And they're up until recently, you know, the sheep are what pays the bills. They're the bread and butter of the farm. They need to be looked after and respected at all costs. And there isn't the tolerance for dogs that don't respect their sheep, because if a dog's naughty and bites a sheep, that's, you know, that's damaging the shepherd or the farmer's livelihood. But beyond that, I just think we've got a duty of care, because there are charges. We need to look after them. We're so wholly responsible for them and their welfare. And if they're looking bad or hurt or whatever, then it is your responsibility. And I've always made a big thing about protecting your sheep and looking after your sheep. And at the end of the day, when you go out to trial, if you look after your sheep well and look after them on the course, they will help you. They will look after you when it comes to a dog trial. They'll be better behaved at the pen and at the shed and all the rest of it. So I think as well, it is something that people forget, especially if they've come to sheepdog trialing from other sports and they just treat the sheep like objects to be trained on. And I don't like that attitude. And I quite often see people run sheep far longer than what sheep would naturally do. And I find that frustrating. And it's something that it's our ethos, and it's something we train. And we're like, you need to look after your sheep first and foremost. The dog training is always secondary.
And I really love hearing it. That was exactly the example. And I forgot, to be fair, because it's probably a year ago now. I was out looking at sheepdogs, and the sheep were just puffed. Like they were,
Yeah.
and they were, I mean, really done. They were done. I actually, because I know nothing about sheep, and this is a complete novice coming in here. I mean, you should see me try and catch them. It is definitely a comedy. It would be YouTubeable. And I was just really upset with, and it's just a thing for me. I'm a pet person, really, and so for me to see them really exhausted, like they were really exhausted, and I don't like them run ragged like that. It just doesn't sit that.
That's really disappointing that you saw that as well. Like, I just think it's bad for the industry as a whole that sheep are treated like that. You know, they're wonderful, fabulous animals, and I think it's sad that they get treated like that. But hopefully, I think if we can get out there that people coming into the sport, like the sheep are the priority, then hopefully it'll help to, you know, grow, and people will be more respectful of their
And
sheep.
there's so much learning there, and I can't help it. But I mean, I've learned I can't do it yet. The whole tipping a sheep, I'm not good at that. I haven't managed to do it. So putting them between your legs and like basically turning them over. But when you're sat there and you're trying to look at them, they are nice animals. Like they are nice animals, and they are. I can't help but feel an affinity with them. I like them. I like them. There's something
Yeah.
likable
And I
about them.
think you need to be able to read your sheep and understand your sheep and want to look after your sheep in order to be a good competitor. If you're just going to hash and be rough with them, you're never going to have a good trial. That's long and the short of it. And I get lots of people come to me and they're like, "Oh, I was at such and such a trial and I got a bad sheep and blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, potentially you increase your risk of getting a bad sheep if you're disrespectful to them. Like, bad sheep do happen. Sometimes you just get a feisty one in the packet, but you definitely, if you treat them roughly, if they don't trust your dog, if they don't trust your handling, they are going to be more likely to act up. And yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen a bad sheep at a trial, but they do happen. It's where
Right.
sheep turn into goats and they decide to think independently, and one will just like run off at a right angle and disappear off the trial field.
Can't imagine it. I'm going to look out for it. I'm going to
Oh,
watch.
it happens a lot.
So tell us about a trial. It's a really nice moment to go there, because actually that's something that I did go to watch the English nationals,
Oh,
and
you
they
did
were
good.
under fog.
Oh
So
God, yeah, that's right. It was not a good English national, was it?
however, I obviously watched you at a local trial. I
Mhm.
still understand nothing. Tell everybody, all of our listeners, what would
Yeah.
happen right from the beginning. So let's go like real basic. Like what would happen at the beginning of a trial, and what sort of things does a dog need to know before it gets to that stage?
Yeah, all trials are basically the same. So your dog has to run out in a pear shape, which is yeah, give or take. So as to leave your feet, run out in a sort of pear shape. The widest point of the pear should be as it passes the sheep. Run all the way around to the back of the sheep to balance, and that's called the outrun. So that's worth 20 points. The next element is a lift. So that's like the first contact the dog has with the sheep. And that's like the dog coming up and saying, right, guys, we're moving. And there's 10 points for that because you can make a real big mess of the lift or you can make a really good job of it. And because it's your dog's first initial contact with a sheep, it can make a big influence on the rest of the trial. It's like, if you imagine if you go on a first date, that first initial contact is so, so important. And if you have a bad one, it's really hard to make up time afterwards, even if they're really good. Then you bring the sheep towards you, usually through a set of gates, and we call that the fetch. It's worth 20 points. And then you turn them around behind you and you drive either to the right or the left. You should know that before you go out.
And when you say you drive them, is that dictated before you go out, or you get to choose that?
No, it's always dictated. So they'll say it's a left-hand drive or right-hand drive when you go out. So your dog gets in behind the sheep. This is all by whistles or voice commands, by the way. And we'll drive them up through a set of wooden hurdles, turn at a right angle, drive them across the field, which is called the cross drive, put them through another set of gates, and then bring them to your feet. So all that driving element's worth 30 points. So if you imagine you have a full set of 30 points and you lose points for everything that's incorrect. So if you miss the gates, that's probably 10 or 12 points off. And for all the time that your sheep are offline. So if you imagine a straight line from your feet to the first set of gates, the whole time your sheep are offline, you're losing points. Same with the fetch. Then when you get into your feet, it depends. Some areas will have you shed first, which will be, say there's 4 sheep, you'll split them into 2, and your dog comes in and takes off the 2. Other areas, they have the pen first, and that's the most understood part of the dog trial. You get the sheep, and between you and the dog, you put them in the pen and you close the gate. So usually with us, it usually ends with the shedding, just because we're running on Scottish Blackface. And usually if you split them, they then become too wild to pen. So, but in some areas, you will pen them last, which does kind of look tidier. And then if you are at a national, we do a thing called singling. So the very last thing you do is you shed 1 sheep from the batch, which is really difficult to do because sheep are naturally flock animals and they don't want to be split up from each other. So it's really, really hard to do. And it's a really good sort of task to show how talented and powerful your dog is. So the whole course set of 100. And it varies massively. I've seen trials won on like 65, 70 points. And then I've seen trials won on 99 points. So the variance is always the sheep. So it's different sheep for every single run. The most common question we get asked is like, is it the same, 4 sheep for everyone? And I'm like, no. I don't know. To me, it seems like common sense that
they would be so tired. The sheep would be done.
Exactly. But no, different 4 sheep. So they have maybe a packet of 100 at the top of the field, let 4 out at the top, and then it just goes round and round like that.
And so I suppose there's maybe an element of luck as to what sheep you get as well, because some of those sheep are going to be better than others.
It's a terrible sport because not only have you got the luck to know what 4 sheep you're getting, you could get a rogue sheep, right? You could run at different times of the day. Sheep are more settled at different times of the day. So like late afternoon, early evening, they can be quite good and quite well behaved, but that's your luck of the draw. Then also it's subjective. So the judge can take off 15 points for a missed gate or 7 points for a missed gate. So that's really frustrating. It's also timed. So you have a time limit and the judge will set the time limit. So it can be anything from 9 minutes to 15, depending. So, and then you're obviously at the mercy of the weather. And also you're running not just one animal, you're relying on other animals. So you've got to hope that you're in a good mood, your dog's in a good mood, the sheep are in a good mood, your judge is in a good mood.
And then you've got weather.
And then your weather and the people at the top of the field. So there's so many variables that mean it's so hard to get consistent. So that's why the consistent people are obviously amazing.
Yeah, no, real cool stuff. Now you touched on whistles and commands. I've just about got with some of my commands. So come by, away.
Yeah.
And then suddenly there's like get up, walk, stand there.
Yeah.
And I'm like listening to all these things. Oh, I've got the funniest one. This one I had never heard before. I couldn't understand it. I was in Wales and I kept hearing, "You're a bitch." And I was like, what are they talking about? Like, what are they actually saying? And this is appropriate, even though it might not sound appropriate. And they were saying, "Good bitch." And I was like, I don't understand. Are they saying you like difficult
Yeah.
dog? Like I couldn't understand it. No, they were saying good bitch. Good
What?
bitch.
I've never heard that. Really?
Multi people. So
Good
in
bit.
Wales, yeah, good bitch.
Wow, I've never heard that.
A new world. Like for me, I listened to it for about a month before I had to ask the question. And I was like, I'm beyond this and multi people. And I mean good people, Emma. Good
Yeah,
people.
that's interesting. Obviously, I'm
I
I'm
thought the
assuming it was
same.
a female.
Yeah, the dog was female, and yeah, that was what they were saying. So you know what,
Mm.
I've learned a whole new language, and I also realized that the dogs that I've been training, like when they say like here Nell, you Nell. So I've learned you Nell because a lot of what they're
Yeah.
saying to their dogs, especially like when I've been given a dog like they've given me some older dogs to try and handle because obviously I don't know a lot. They often do speak a lot of Welsh. Like the dogs speak Welsh too because that's
Yep.
what they're handling with. So yeah, it's just been really interesting and really interesting picking up a dog that is really well trained, but doesn't necessarily like my timing is off and the things that I'm saying are off, but the dog is still very giving, like very
Yeah.
giving. So really cool. So tell us what your commands mean on verbal,
Yeah.
and then I want you to just sound out some whistles. And this is, I'm sorry for our listeners, this is largely for me. However, I think it's really interesting learning too.
Yeah. So border collies always work in circles. So it's best to not think of it as right and left because if you imagine when the dog is on the other side of the sheet, your left and right are reversed, so it's quite difficult. So we always see is like see, yep. For come by is clockwise. So that's the best way to think about it. So if you keep giving it, the dog will just keep running in that circle, come by. And away is anti-clockwise, so the dog runs round like this. And once you kind of grasp the fact it's circles and not left and right, it's way easier than trying to think of it as left and right. And then we use lots of different commands for stop. So like we use stand, some people use stop, lie down, sit, just whatever suits, to be honest. And then the same for walk on, like walk on, get up, walk, walk. There can often mean go straight at them. And then there's the usual, our collar fun is always the same. That'll do. And loads of people know that because they've watched Babe.
Yes, fly.
Yeah, that'll do pig. That'll do pig. And beyond that, there's lots of sort of intricacies and various things. And most of them we do the whistle. Like the tone of your whistle makes such a difference to the size of the flank, the speed they're going at, and whatnot. So do you want me to go through them?
Yeah, definitely. Now we may not be able to hear your whistle. I'll tell you if we do or not, because sometimes our recording
Too
will
high.
sound it out. So well, it'll
Yeah,
just sound it out. But I've got mine on too, so I'm going to try and mimic you,
yeah,
depending
yeah,
on whether
yeah.
people can hear it or not. So I'll tell you straight away if we can hear it or not.
Okay, so left is I'll just do it quite low.
No, we can't hear it. It's so
You
annoying. You're
can't
gonna have
hear
to
it,
do it.
no, is it
No,
not? All
so
right,
weird
so
with Zoom. It's so
two
weird.
sharp whistles,
So
like
two
tweet
sharp
tweet.
whistles,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that is your two sharp whistles are come by.
yeah. Two sharp
Okay.
come by. And then to the right is I use low. So usually you have them opposite. So if one side's sharp, the other side will be low. Just it means that the dog, even if it only catches part of the whistle, it kind of can understand because you've got to
Yep.
understand that sometimes they're operating at 800 yards away. So it can be blowing a gale, it can be really noisy. So if they can even hear part of it, right?
Yeah, can't hear it, but I'm gonna just assume it sounds like
It's low.
whistle, but
Yeah,
whistle version.
yeah. And then stops, just the universal, just long drawn out whistle. And then
So long drawn out whistle. And you said something on a video I was watching of yours, and it sounded like whoa. But
yes,
go on, say it.
and it just kind of drops off like you maybe hear it with my voice better.
Yeah, you can hear it with your voice. You can hear it with your
Yeah.
voice.
It's just like whoa. And even like a dog that isn't trained on whistles, if you give them that, it does just kind of make them go, whoa, yeah, and draw up a bit. And then walk on is like quite a jaunty one. It's like, and
With
it's
your mouth again? With your mouth again?
so it's just like, it's quite jaunty, you know. If you heard it, I think they're quite self-explanatory. Like if I gave them to you and didn't say what they were, maybe it's just because I'm so instinctive with them now, but it does sound like, come on. It's like what you do to a horse, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whoa. So with those basic commands, you can kind of work a sheepdog. That's kind of all you need, to be honest. And it's good. As soon as you get them on whistles, it means you can operate them at big distances, and it means you don't have to shout, because the problem is border collies are quite sensitive. And if you're shouting to convey volume and they're quite far away, it can sometimes upset them because they think they're getting shouted at. And border collies are like goody two-shoes. They don't like to think you're upset with them. They want to always be doing the right thing. So whistles are awesome for that.
Oh, I love it. There's my whistle tutorial. And in terms of when you train a dog on a whistle, what do you start first? So you obviously do the verbals. So you teach them all of their verbals, so they know they come by, they know they're away, they know the stops, they know everything on a verbal, and then you put it on a whistle.
Yeah. So my method is do everything on verbal first, and then I just start introducing the whistle. Usually I do the stop and walk up together because they are quite self-explanatory. And I always say never just put one whistle on a dog. So my very first dog, I put a really good stop whistle on her. So she would like drop of a hat. If I blew the whistle, she would just like her legs just would go out from under her and she would drop to the floor. But then I realized when I started trying to teach the other whistles that she just heard any whistle and she dropped to the floor. So it was really hard to get her out of that. So now I always teach them stop and walk on together so that they understand that they can mean different things. And then I teach one side, and then after a couple of lessons, I put on the other side. But really, you can put a dog on whistles in like 5 or 6 lessons if the initial groundwork has been done properly.
I love that you say initial groundwork, because I think that's a really good topic to quickly touch on. What's your initial groundwork? Because I know there's a lot of dogs that really do come across as very natural at what they're doing, but I think that allows us to be quite lazy. And we were talking about this just prior to the podcast. That's the same in agility. A dog like Skittles, for example, my young cocker, she would let you be quite lazy with your groundwork because she's such a natural little dog. She's so good. Like you could get away with not having groundwork. And so you get some dogs that let you get away without having it. And then you kind of think, I don't want to teach it. And then you get like to the stage of they're almost ready to start training and competing and you haven't done the groundwork. So how does that work in your world?
Yeah, I think very similarly, like it's really difficult. Sometimes you get a really natural dog and you want to just shoot through all the phases and just get to the end. You're like, this dog's really gonna, get it. So yeah, just getting their balance on sheep, getting their flanks the right shape, getting them stopping when you ask them to, and just getting them moving correctly around the sheep is all important. And people get frustrated because quite often if we're troubleshooting about why a dog is not doing what it's supposed to, I'm always saying, look, you need to go back to basics, and people hate it. They do not want to be hearing that they have to go back to basics, but it's pretty much 90% of the time what I recommend when people are having problems is because they've skipped something in the basics. And to be honest, if you don't get them right, it's really hard to go back and put them right because the dog's already got the knowledge that it can do them wrong. So if you get them absolutely sound, then you're absolutely flying.
So what are your basics?
Basics. So we've got a little sort of half-acre field, and I'll be able to get the dog to go around smartly, gather them, and it gets a bit intricate because I'll make sure that they cover the sheep properly on both sides. I'll get them so that they stop perfectly, that they're flanking all the way around, and that they stop when I ask them to stop, and they come off the sheep when I ask them to. Just if you get those basics right, then you can start building up your outruns. But if you've not got the basics right at 50 yards, you're not going to have them right at 150. So just building up to that gradually.
And that's a really interesting point. So a small half an acre field, and I've got a half an acre here with sheep on. And what I've been doing, again, novice, I've been allowing the sheep to go all the way out and away. And then when I want to work them, I bring them back into that little half acre so that they're not in it all the time. Yeah. And that's been really cool to have it. But can you ruin a dog by just staying in a small space, do you think? Or do you think that, because that was my other thought. Yeah. I wonder if I need a bigger field as well.
I think you do a lot, like once you've got the basics, but border collies are really intelligent and they need to be kind of moving forward all the time. And yeah, I say they need something that's more challenging, whether it's mixing it up with more sheep, less sheep, different sheep. move into different areas. They can go a long way. I've heard of people who did all their training on runner ducks and then could trial their dogs. So they are very versatile, but I think it's always, if you've got the option to progress and onto more land, more acreage, different sheep, you should definitely do it.
That's no great advice. And I love what you're saying about being able to do everything in a small space and then push it on. Now, when you said that, again, brand new at this, when they say in hand work, that's in hand when they're close enough for you to be able to speak to them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So like, yeah, I would say within sort of, yeah, half an acre, that would be classed as in hand work.
And I've already been told I need to be louder and clearer and stronger. I'm quite soft with my words.
Mhm.
And they said already you need more like speak to them, like really speak to them. But I'm very gentle with my words. Like, oh come by our way. Like I'm really not loud. Do you think that's a problem?
I've heard a really good saying though the other day, and it is like, speak quietly but carry a big stick. And it's like you can speak quietly to the dog so long as they know that the authority is still there. Like I try and speak quietly to my dogs unless they're being naughty, and then I can up the volume and go, hey, and then they go, oh yeah, oh she means business. And they kind of sit back and go, oh, because I think if you're always at a high volume, it's really hard to go anywhere when you really need it.
I love
So
that. Yeah, no, I
yeah.
love that. And when I was a school teacher, if you would walk past most of the classrooms, they'd be screaming at the member, like they would be screaming, like, quiet, sit down, rah. And I'd be walking in like, okay, guys, seriously, everyone does their work. It's going to get to end of term. I'm going to get everyone Domino's pizzas. We're going to have a laugh. It's going to be great. So I
Yeah,
would
yeah,
have like great times. And I get that that's probably not the full academic system, but we got the training done. We did the work. We got the grades. We did all the reward systems, and they understood where they stood with me, and I understood where I stood with them. And it was a great. I never had to shout at anyone to take their coat off or enter the classroom quietly or stop eating in my lesson or like
yeah.
you've got that level of respect. Like I
I
do.
bet when you needed to go to town on someone, it was
You
harder
could
for them than what it would have been if you were always at this sort of, if your
exactly.
baseline is here, then yeah,
Where'd you go
it's,
from there?
yeah, exactly. If you're already at this level, you haven't got anywhere to go. Whereas if you're always speak quietly to them, then when you do up it, they go, whoa, this is, and they really take it on board.
Huge, huge. Now, one more thing. I was thinking your dogs, like I'm thinking trialing, but actually your dogs are real general in day to day. They are working and they're working really hard. Give us a day in the life of one of your dogs.
Yeah, it's really hard. We get asked for day in the lives quite a lot, and it's the half of the joy of what we do is because it's so different
Variety.
every single day. And so what we've been doing at the minute, the dogs get out every day and they pretty much get trained every day, even if it's just, having a. Sometimes I say I'm training the dogs and I'm really just exercising them. The sheep will stand in the middle of the field and the dogs will run around and have a nice time. So. It depends. Like today, I got some cows in with Jamie. I ran banjo on the big field. We did some little intricate work with flute. It's just, we mix it up. We don't have a set formula. And because the seasons change so much. So, like, for example, at lambing time, they'll need a different kind of set of skills than what they will do at, say, November, when they're quite full of themselves. So that's half of the joy of what we do, I guess, is the fact that you never get used to a routine because it changes so fast.
You mentioned cows there. Now, you and I had an incident with cows where one of our sheep got out. Thank
Yes.
you. Our sheep field is now very well fenced, and we also have a very brown pen. Um, the cow work, like that does scare me a bit, Do you ever get scared working with cows, or have you ever had any incidents, or is there anything about because that for me, I'm happy with sheep.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no. Like the cows is just a bonus. Like it's great to be able to have a dog that will work cows, and it makes them really brave and confident and competent. But they can get hurt. If a sheep kicks a dog, it's kind of shakes it off. A cow kicks a dog, it's a real problem. But I think for me, it's important that the dogs can do their work because they're first and foremost work dogs and secondary trial dogs. And I think it does make them better all-rounders. But it's always initially, I try to work them with cows quite quickly so that when they're younger, they bounce better than when they're older. I wouldn't, for example, take like a 5 or 6 year old dog to cows for the first time and go, on you go and work cows. you take them when they're young and they're a bit more boisterous and they can kind of like shake themselves off and move on from it.
I
But
think
it's not something that's it's not a prerequisite. I don't think they need to be able to work cows. It's just because often I'm working alone and I need someone to give me a hand.
And that's
So
that's the biggest, it's the biggest thing when I've watched the dogs, and I've really, again, just been observing for the last few weeks, months. What a right hand you've got. Like, what a right hand. Your dog is your right hand. Like, I was trying to catch this sheep to give it a jab, and how you do that without a dog? Like, the dog just makes your life easy. They're covering you everywhere. They're covering you, and you're not telling them what to do at that stage. They know what they're doing because they're covering, and it just makes life. And especially, I was watching an old boy doing like some work the other day, and he's really not able to move, and he can do everything he needs to do because of his dog.
Yeah, I just think people sometimes say to me, they're like, "Oh, we've got a farm, but we haven't got a dog. We don't think we need one." And I just think that's because you've never had a good one. See if you've ever had a good dog on a farm, you'd never ever go back to going without one. They are invaluable. They just make, I don't know how people manage otherwise. Like we use ours just so much. So, but I think to be some extent, they do make me a lazy shepherd because I know I can just go and gather a field and take them to the pens, even though all the gates are open all the way along and I've got a main road to negotiate and whatnot because the dogs are so good. But yeah,
Amazing.
they step up to whatever level you need them to be. And if you're a lazy shepherd, they're there for you.
No, no, I think it's more of a smart shepherd. Think about your language choice. Your language choice is you are a smart and efficient shepherdess. Now, final question, trialing. You've given me all those exercises. What do you find the hardest of all of those exercises?
In since I moved to Scotland, shedding blackies. Oh my God, terrible.
Have you got blackies?
So we've got blackies now. So I moved to Scotland from England and we'd already done well in England. And I was like feeling quite confident. And I got to the first trial and I came into the shedding ring and these blackies were like deer. They were just so wild. I couldn't get near them. The dog couldn't get near them. And I was like, how are we supposed to split these in half? And they always run as a group, 4 sheep go and then 4 sheep go. And it's like ping pong. So after 3 years struggling and struggling and struggling, we think we've finally got a grasp of them because the Scottish National's just been, so it was just the weekend there, and Scottish Blackies, and I was thinking this is going to be a disaster. And then the shedding ring, they'd actually accidentally made it 10 yards too small, which meant it was like nearly half the size of what it should be. And I was like, this is never going to happen. But we shedded the Blackies.
Yes.
Yes.
Amazing.
And I could almost feel,
how did you do, Emma? Tell everyone how you did.
yeah, we got in the team. We got in the team. So it was amazing. But I could
Amazing.
almost feel the pressure because everybody's known that I've had really good courses all summer and then falling apart in the shedding ring with these blackies. And I could feel the pressure. Everyone was like, oh, she can't shed blackies. And then it came off for me and I was like, oh, thank God.
I think that's, although I've asked my last question, I'm asking one more. Do you ever feel the mental pressure from trialing?
Hugely, yeah, definitely. Especially with moving to Scotland, because Scotland is literally where the border collie came from. It's where the best shepherds are. It's like a phenomenally competitive area. And I was like, oh, going out there myself and trying to find my feet whilst everybody's watching is so hard. But I feel it's been really good for my handling, really good. I think learning to run on these wild blackies has done me so much good. I hated it. Like there was a point where I just wanted to give up because I was like, these blackies are going to spoil every single run I ever have. But we're getting there now, I think. I think I can kind of.
Are they worse than? I saw the other day when I was up in Wales, they had these sheep that look like goats. I don't know what they are, but they look like goats. They're like goats. They're skittish and they're fast. They're really fast. They look like baby deer. They look like baby deer.
Yeah, like the soways maybe or something like that.
Yes, that's them.
They're
Like
wild. Yeah, no,
they
they're not.
look
But at least
wild.
they separate though. They're easy to
Okay.
separate. Whereas the
Okay.
blackies like Velcro together and they're just like
That's what I have. I have Blackie, what are they? Blackie cross Texel. And they like stick together, like they run together in a shape together. You can't actually, even when they're like that together. So how interesting.
they do. It's just unbelievable. And trying to read them to make them feel comfortable enough to part is really difficult because you think taking a dog to a sheepdog trial it has to be like, wow, like, I'm the boss and I'm going to scare you all into submission. And it's really not. It's got to be able to take the sheep round. So it's got to be able to manage them and keep them settled all the way round while still mastering them and keep them settled at hand so that you can make a gap so that you can part them. And it's no easy feat.
Well,
Hence
a
the
couple of
Scottish
things.
Shepherds.
A couple of things you've said to me that I've heard today from someone else. One was that you need to be reading the sheep. Like you need to be
Yeah.
reading the sheep, and I'm there so busily watching the dog, and you need to be looking way more at the sheep. So I think that's really cool. The other one was to get hold of whistles and really understand them and know how to use them. I was told to practice Happy Birthday, and I can actually sing Happy Birthday on your whistle, I have to add. And Liza found this in our car park after you left, but so this is your whistle. But I can do the Happy Birthday, but I still can't work out what the whistles are. But you said, like you said, it's much easier when you've got a whistle. And the other thing was on a windy day, I couldn't get my voice to go where it needed, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't.
Whistles are amazing and you can convey such amount of information and you can give them one after another after another. Because imagine the time delay on a whistle reaching the dog is sometimes a second or two, by which point you almost need another command. So you can, some of the really good dogs, you can fire one whistle after another, stop, go left, go right. And you can see the dog, after a second, stop, go left, go right. They can kind of line up the commands. It's supposed to be the same with agility, you line them up. They're on the A-frame and you're telling them jump tunnel.
Yeah.
And they can line them up in their brains. That's something
I've
special,
got
I
so
think.
many things I want to ask you. It's literally hard. Like, I know, like, no, like, let's like, but there's so many things I want to ask. Like, I know that if I didn't do agility at the level I do it, I would quite easily be able to fall into this world and want to do it at that level. Like, it would be easy. How about you? Could you do another sport? Is there another sport you could get into?
Do you know what? Yeah, like I started in agility before sheepdogging. I actually did agility, loved it. That was like back in the olden days, though, where it was like elementary, starters,
Yes, it
advanced,
was.
senior.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, it
yes.
was really good, really good. And then but obviously an agility dog doesn't earn its keep. And Dad was like, your dog needs to earn its keep. So we had to branch out and diversify into sheepdogging. And that was when I was like, oh, do you know what?
Mega.
Also, I really feel we do get an advantage because we get like 10 minutes on a course, which is nice to be able to settle yourself and get yourself focused. Whereas
26 seconds.
you're like blinking, you miss it. It's like, poof, it's gone.
And you
I
might
don't
get to like world championships in, I don't know, I've been in like Switzerland and Sweden and Norway, and you might go all that way for 1 minute in that ring. You might travel for like 4 days and you've got 1 minute, like 1 minute, two runs, two different runs. Like and just like you said, that's what reminded me when you said like multiple cues, give cue after cue after cue. Like that is what we do. We'll go tunnel, jump, weavers, 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 poles. Let's go. Like you're giving them like
yeah.
wrap, check, go tunnel. So you are giving them the next piece of information. And we want a dog who really is sharp on the cue, like real sharp on the cue. We want them fast and sharp on the cue. I think you want them sharp, but I also think you want a calmness about them. Like it shouldn't be sharp and like frantic. It should be sharp and sort of calm with it, a cool head with it.
And so I think there's almost coming a divide between the ISDS and the sports dogs because we are looking for that sort of cool calmness.
Yeah.
Whereas like we don't want them to be too sharp because sharp movements upset the sheep and we want a sheep to be nice and relaxed. So yeah, it's but I feel for you, like at least with sheepdog trialing, you don't need great spatial awareness. You've got like one post standby. Whereas you've got like jumps and tunnels and you're running flat out and you're watching the dog and it's just, it's hats off to you. It's amazing.
No, back to you. I watch and I'm like in awe. I'm definitely game. I'm watching and learning. So Emma, I could ask loads more questions. I'd love to have you back at some point. Are you game?
Yeah, absolutely. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, really. I've got so many more questions, and I also know that our listeners they stay here for about this length of time. So I definitely want to keep training our listeners well too. So thank you for joining us. It's been incredible. I know that everyone is going to have loved it, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thanks for having me.